So, as you know, we have been talking about fairy tales, and we have been trying to identify fairy tale elements, also story elements in a fairy tale. So, we talked about things like Once Upon a Time, Happily Ever After, evil characters, unusual names, the number 3, magic, a faraway place, and princes and princesses. So this fairy tale has a lot of those things in it. So you're going to be looking for those, but we're also going to be looking for the characters, the setting, where is it and when is it, what happened first, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end. So the title of this book is Rumplestiltskin by Paul O. Zelinsky. Rumplestiltskin. That's an unusual title. So we're going to go ahead and read about it and see if you can figure out why it's called Rumpelstiltskin. Once there was a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. Now a miller is somebody who takes grain like wheat and crushes it and makes it into flour. So here is the poor miller, and here's his daughter, and here's the container of flour that he's apparently milled. On his way to town one day, the miller encountered the king. Wanting to impress him, the miller said, "I have a daughter who knows the art of spinning straw into gold." Now the king had a passion for gold, and such an art intrigued him. The word intrigued means it interested him. He was kind of interested in that. So he ordered the miller to send his daughter to the castle straight away. So he wants the daughter to make some gold for him. When the girl was brought before him, the king led her to a room that was filled with straw. He gave her spools, which are the thing that we wrap a thread around, and a spinning wheel, and said, "You may spin all night, but if you have not spun this straw into gold by morning, you will die." Now, with that, he locked the door, and the girl was left inside. Here's the miller bragging to the king about his daughter. And here is the castle, and the king and the daughter. And there's a pile of straw. Can you see that pile of straw there? Okay. So then he let her in there and locked the door. Now look what we saw already. It begins with once upon a time. There was a faraway place, the castle. There was a king. There was, well, let me not tell you anymore. We'll get to that. All right. There sat the poor miller's daughter without the slightest idea how anyone could spin straw into gold. For the life of her, she did not know what to do. She grew more and more frightened, and then she began to weep. Weeping is crying, but with a lot of noises. Suddenly the door sprang open, and a tiny man stepped in. "Good evening, Mistress Miller," he said. "Why are you sobbing?" "Oh," cried the girl, "I must spin the straw into gold, and I don't know how." Here she is crying, and this is a spinning wheel that she's supposed to use to make the straw into gold. And here is the strange man who came into the door. Now remember, the door was locked. How did he get in? I want you to think about that. How did he get in? The little man said, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" "My necklace," said the girl. The little man took her necklace and sat down at the spinning wheel. He pulled 3 times. Whirr, 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 and the spool was wound full of gold thread. He fitted another spool on, and whirr, 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 3 pulls, and that one too was full. And so it went until morning, when all the straw was spun and all the spools were full of gold. So here's the girl with the straw. Here's the little man working really hard with that spinning wheel. And then you're going to see, here's all these spools filled with gold thread. When the king came at sunrise, he was amazed and delighted, which means he was very happy. But all that gold only made him greedier. Greedy is when somebody wants more than they already have. So he led the miller's daughter to a larger room filled with straw, and he ordered her to spin this straw too before dawn if she valued her life. So I'm going to show you all the gold that was spun out of all that straw, and then over here is the room filled with straw that he wants her to spin this night. The girl did not know what to do. She began to weep. Once more, the door opened and the little man stepped in. "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold for you?" he asked. "The ring on my finger," answered the girl, and the little man took her ring. Then he set the spinning wheel whirring, and before the night was over, he had spun all the straw into gold. Now, this picture doesn't show him making any of the gold. It does show the spinning wheel, and it shows the little man taking her ring. Shortly after sunrise, the king returned. Piles of golden spools glowed in the morning light. The king rejoiced at the sight of so much gold, but he was not satisfied, which means he didn't have enough in his mind. He led the miller's daughter to a third, even bigger room that was piled high with straw. "Tonight, you must spin this straw too," ordered the king. "And if you succeed, you shall become my wife." Because, he thought, I could not find a richer wife in all the world. So here's the gold that he found in the morning in the room that was filled with straw. So now he's taking her into a room that's bigger. Wait till you see this room. Filled with straw. And you see, there's the girl, and there's the little man. When the king had left, the little man appeared for the third time, number 3. "What will you give me if I spin for you yet once more?" he asked. "I have nothing else," the girl replied. "Then promise me that when you become queen, your first child belongs to me." Does that seem like a good deal? Do you think she should do that? I don't know. She'll lose her life if she doesn't do it, but she'll lose her child if she does. Let's find out what she did. She heard that, the miller's daughter gasped. So that means to go, like that. How could she promise such a thing? Then she thought, but who knows whether that will ever happen? And as she could think of no other way to save herself, she promised. And the little man once again spun all the straw into gold. So there he is making having her make that promise. And there she's going, I'm sorry. The little man once again spun all the straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found everything as he had wished, he married the miller's beautiful daughter, and she became queen. Just like the little man said about her becoming queen. And there she is with her long train and a little girl carrying the end of the bridal train. which means the long dress, the long part of the dress. A year passed, and the queen brought a handsome baby boy into the world. She gave scarcely a thought to that little man, but one day he appeared suddenly in her room. "Now, give me what you promised me," he demanded. The queen pleaded with the little man. He could take all the royal treasure if he would only let her keep her child. But her pleading was in vain. So there's the queen with the baby. There's the little man. And she's saying, "Please don't take him." Pleading means that she's saying, "Please don't take him. Please, please." And it was in vain means it didn't work. Then she began to weep so piteously that at last the little man was moved. That means he was like, "Oh, all right, let me see. All right, let's do this. I will give you 3 days." There's that number 3 again. He said, "If by the end of that time you know my name, you may keep the child." So, you think she's going to figure out his name? Think about it for a minute. It must be a pretty unique name that he's saying, "You have to know my name." So let's find out. Long into the night the queen sat, and through the next day, thinking over all the names she had ever heard. That evening the little man returned. Beginning with Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, the queen recited every name she knew, one after another. But to each one the little man replied, "That is not my name." So there's the queen. This is her servant. There's the little man looking in saying, "Do you know my name? Do you know my name?" She doesn't. That was day 1. Now how many days? It was 3 days. The second day, the queen made inquiries in town, searching for new names to say. And when the little man came that evening, she came up with the strangest and most unusual ones to give him. She tried beastie ribs and legoram and string bones, but he would only reply, "That is not my name." There's the queen, and there's the baby, and there's the little man. Look at his face. He's kind of like saying, "Oh, no, you don't know." She only has 1 more day to do this. Now the queen grew truly frightened, and she sent her most faithful servant into the woods to look for the little man. Now, here's the queen sending the servant out into the woods, okay? So she's going to follow this path, and then we see her over here going into the woods looking, okay? Then we see her over here looking still. And then we see her over here looking still. And then we see her way back there. If you look carefully, there's a little fire there that you can barely see. The servants searched through thickets and over clearings deep into the forest. At last, near the top of a hill, she spied him. He was riding on a cooking spoon around a great fire and crying out, "I brew my beer, I bake my loaves," which means bread, "and soon the queen's own son I'll claim. Oh, lucky me, for no one knows that Rumplestiltskin is my name." The servant made her way back as fast as she could manage, and at noon reached the castle. You can imagine how glad the queen was when she heard the name. So there's the little man riding on his spoon, and here's the fire, and here's the cooking pot. Late that evening, the little man arrived. "Now, Mrs. Queen," he said, "do you know my name, or do I take the child?" So the queen asked him. I want you to look at the queen's face here. She does know, right? There's the servant standing behind her and the baby. Is your name Will? No. Is your name Phil? No. In that case, is your name Rumplestiltskin? The devil told you that! The devil told you that! Shrieked Rumplestiltskin. And in a fury, he jumped on his cooking spoon and flew out the window. Very angry, doesn't he? And he was never heard from again. There's the queen and the king and the baby. And over here, flying away, is the little man on his spoon, holding his hat on as tight as he can. And that is the end of the story. So, your job is to think of, well, you can try and think of all the fairy tale elements like an unusual name and the number 3 and once upon a time and a faraway place and kings and queens. But I also want you to think about who were the characters in the story. Try and include not just one, but the ones that were important in the story. Where did it take place? It took place in a couple different parts of in the story, depending on where you were reading. What happened first? What was the first thing you remember happening? Then what happened in the middle of the story? There's a lot of different things you could put. And then what happened at the end of that story? All right. I'm going to look forward to seeing what you have to say. Bye now.